I did it! For years I have dreamed of some epic Dark Angels Fallen based on this picture. We've built, converted, broken and scavenged our way to making these two Primaris intercessors true Dark Angels. With the proper iconography and homemade cloaks, these renegades need nothing more than a lick of paint. So join me as I show you how to paint these green Fallen Dark Angels. This is Cursed Crusader Arts. Some people were concerned with the massive number of scratches I put on these Space Marines, as well as the usual battle damage. This often boils down to personal preference, but I'm looking for a beaten and rugged look. Once the Chaos Primer is in place, we can paint on our first layers of Incubi Darkness, and then War Flesh. We will see how most of these tiny scratches are filled by the paint, leaving an uneven surface. This was the plan all along, and this will set our intercessors apart from the other smoothed armoured Space Marines that we typically see on the battlefield. The next stage of our armour is to add some degree of light reflection by mixing War Flesh with Warboss Green and layering it on the upper sections of the armour panels. The shade of green is a little off, displaying too much of a yellow hue from the previous layer, but we're going to fix this shortly. For now, let's address the metals. I use true metals here, so I begin with lead belcher. This is applied to the armour trim, blades, chains, and also the casings of any bolt rifles the miniature may have. Reinforce this with a layer of iron breaker to the top surfaces where we want the light to be the brightest. With this done, we can now fix our green. This is the most exciting and satisfying part of the paint job. When I finished this stage, I was hit with a wave of nostalgia, and comparing the new minis to my old ones, the green is almost identical. So here it is, the super complex stage that transforms these Fallen from wannabe pretenders to true exiles of the First Legion.
What? Here, look. No, I am forbidden to look upon.
Slap the heaviest and most indiscriminate wash of Baletan green over everything. Armour, metal, chains and trims. Everything gets hit with green juice. Wait for this to dry, but look at the armour. Look how the Warboss green is stained with the new filter, pushing the yellow hue back and allowing that deep Dark Angels green to show. We're going to finish the armour now. Take some more Warboss green, but thin it down this time and stipple it over the highest and brightest areas of the armour. The stippling motion is going to create tiny dots that will help create more texture in our miniature, and help all those tiny scratches with creating the illusion of minor battle damage, enhancing the bigger chunks that have been blown out of the armour. Use this as an opportunity to also highlight any edges you think will have been hit by the light. Once this is done, apply a standard wash of Baletan green to the upper areas where you stippled the previous one. Then wash the lower and darkest sections with either Agrax Earthshade or Nuln Oil. The choice is yours, depending on what kind of lighting and shadow you want. Our armour is now just about complete and ready to hit the battlefield. When I first made my original Fallen, I had envisioned them as something like assassins, using toxins and poisons to overwhelm their enemies as they use the shadows to their advantage. This is why our metals have been washed green. It's more of a personal touch. I highlight the very edges with Stormhost Silver, but I use this sparingly as it's very intense and it can be difficult to push the colour back with washes without ruining the rest of the other layers. You can then decide if you want to add a wash of Nuln Oil. I don't do this to the blades, but I do use it for any other metal sections, such as the chainmail or the pipes on the Champion's power pack. The lore accurate Fallen from before the Horus Heresy had all of their iconography painted red, and this is something that I've kept with this design, especially as it goes well with the red Chaos Star that we see on our original source of inspiration. First I go over this with Corax White. This is what I had to hand, but any white or pale yellow will do the job nicely. This will shine through our red paints, making them seem brighter and more intense. Layer on Mephiston Red, and then do the same with Evil Sun's Scarlet. With the bright reds in place, I use 2 thin washes of Nuln Oil to let the details pop, and allow us to see the individual wings on the iconography. When this is dry, I pick out the details with a mixture of Evil Sun Scarlet and Cloaks White, before finishing it with a final highlight of Evil Sun Scarlet. Our fallen angels are close to completion, leaving only small details behind. Part of the kit bashing process had me add several skulls. These were painted with a base coat of Mournfang Brown and was followed up with thin layers of Zandri dust and then flayed one flesh, each time picking out only the brightest spots and details. I then used a wash of Seraphim Sepia for the brighter sections, and then Agrax Earthshade for the darker areas. With the bones completed, all that's left to do is the one thing that you've all been waiting for: the cloaks. Our homemade cloaks are made with muslin, so it works a little differently to the plastic moulded ones that we're used to. However, for these minis, the cloaks will be black, so it's not too difficult to work with. I mix up a grey solution of Cloaks White and Abaddon Black and dry brush this over a majority of the cloak. The most important part here is that the paint, or the brush itself, isn't too wet, as we don't want to fill in all of the holes in the muslin. This will help us maintain the depth and natural detail that the muslin provides. A second dry brush of the same mixture but with a little more Cloaks White is applied, but only to the higher surfaces, again where we expect the light to hit. Make sure to let this dry fully to prevent the paint from running into the depths of the fabric. Once the paint is dry, wash this with Nuln Oil to push back the bright grey. We need the cloak to look black as if it's reflecting light, rather than looking grey that's a little dirty. You may find that you need more than one wash to finish the job, but once you've let it dry, you can now add any Chaos Sigils to it using the same method as the red iconography. And then you're done. Except you're not. The model is truly spectacular. Anyone who knows me knows that I crave a Grimdark experience. I apply a generous amount of ground charcoal to the base and the lower panels of the armour. I've harvested this from a local fire pit and I grind it down, but you can do this with a black dry pastel and grind it to dust for the same effect. Focus this on the armour where the shadows are greatest, and also on the cloak where the folds are deepest. You can then secure it by applying a generous amount of isopropyl alcohol, and while it's wet, we're going to create some mud. I have a contact powder that is supposed to resemble brake dust and rust, but as I was playing around with it, I found that it made an excellent mud effect when it mixes with the alcohol. Apply this only to the base, feet, and lower sections of the cloak to make it look dirty and heavy. Doing this means that we don't need to resort to rust effects, as I believe the prideful nature of the First Legion will not allow them to let their war gear rust. Once this is dry, if you find it too bright, a wash of Agrax Earthshade or Nuln Oil will darken it down, and with that, our fallen angels are finally complete. It's a little different to the lore-accurate Fallen that we're familiar with. Mine do not sport the black pre-heresy armour, and I have allowed them to stray off the Emperor's path and into the waiting arms of chaos. But they ooze character, and I believe a force of these would draw the attention of many passers-by. Painting tricks sell the idea of textures, and today we've covered a rough and battered texture, so check out this video if you're into something a little more slimy. But whatever you do, make things, have fun, and I'll see you next time on Cursed Crusader Arts.